Hey guys, tonight we are stepping back into a world where the horizon isn't just a line on a map, but a destination earned through the soles of your feet. We are leaving the marble heart of Rome behind, trading the noise of the Subura for the steady, hypnotic beat of iron-shod sandals on the Queen of Roads. Imagine the weight of your pack, the cool morning air of Latium, and the daunting realization that the journey ahead is measured in hundreds of miles, not minutes. You probably won't survive this, not without some serious blisters that would make a modern hiker weep, and quite possibly a case of Roman trench foot that your local pharmacy definitely doesn't have a cream for. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. If you're tucked in or just settling down, let me know where in the world you're listening from and what time it is for you. Are you watching the sun come up, or is it deep into the night? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand just outside the Porta Capena. The sun is a pale, hesitant sliver of gold peeking over the Caelian hill, and the air still carries the sharp, lingering scent of Rome's morning. Wood smoke, baking bread, and that unmistakable, slightly damp smell of the Tiber. Your pack, your sarcina, feels heavier than it did in the barracks. It's balanced on a T-shaped pole across your shoulder, biting into the muscle through your wool tunic and the heavy leather of your lorica hamata. To your left and right, the men of your contubernium are doing the same thing, shuffling, adjusting straps, and exhaling clouds of mist into the chilly air. There's no fanfare today, no trumpets or cheering crowds. This isn't a march to war, it's just a relocation. You're moving from the capital down to the southern coast, and the only thing between you and Brundisium is about 350 miles of the most stubbornly straight road ever conceived by the human mind. You take the first step, clack. Your calligi, those famous Roman military sandals, hit the basalt paving stones. These aren't just shoes, they're engineering marvels in their own right, with thick leather soles reinforced by dozens of iron hobnails. When 5,000 men hit the stones at once, it doesn't sound like walking, it sounds like a landslide. Clack-crunch, clack-crunch. It's a rhythmic metallic heartbeat that starts in your heels, vibrates up through your shins, and eventually settles somewhere in the base of your skull. You start to count. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's a way to kill the time, or perhaps a way to let the time kill you. The Appian Way is surprisingly smooth here, so close to the city. The stones are fitted together with such precision that you can barely see the seams. It's a bit like walking on a giant dark grey jigsaw puzzle that was put together by someone with extreme OCD. Historians still argue whether the original road, commissioned by Appius Claudius Caecus back in 312 BC, was as perfectly paved as the one you're walking on now, or if it was initially just a very high-quality gravel track that later emperors turned into this stone-clad monument to ego and logistics. Either way, Appius was a man of vision, even if he was literally blind by the time the road reached its first milestone. He wanted a straight line to the south, and by Jupiter, he got one. If a hill was in the way, the Romans simply cut through it. If there was a valley, they built a bridge. The Roman spirit basically viewed geography as a personal insult that needed to be corrected with masonry. You pass the first milestone, a stout, waist-high pillar of stone. 1 mile down, only 349 to go. You'd think the Queen of Roads would have better scenery than the backs of your comrades' heads. But for now, it's just a sea of red wool and bouncing shields. Your shield, the scutum, is currently encased in a leather cover to protect it from the elements, hanging off your back like a massive rectangular turtle shell. It's awkward and hits your calves every 10 steps if you don't hold the strap just right. Honestly, trying to walk 20 miles a day with this much gear is less like marching and more like competitive furniture moving. To your right, the Temple of Mars Gradivus looms out of the morning haze. It's a massive, imposing structure where generals come to offer sacrifices before heading out on campaign. You give it a quick nod, hoping the god of war isn't too offended that you're just moving supplies and not actually going to stab anyone today. A few local merchants are already setting up stalls along the roadside, selling watered-down wine and authentic good luck charms. You see a vendor selling small clay figurines of gods, and you swear he looks exactly like the guy who sold you that waterproof cloak last winter, the one that melted the first time it saw a drizzle. Roman consumer protection is basically, let the buyer beware, or let the buyer be ready to throw hands. The city is receding now. The tall insulae, the Roman apartment blocks, are being replaced by the sprawling villas of the ultra-wealthy. These are the suburban retreats of the elite, surrounded by high walls and lush gardens. You catch the scent of jasmine and honeysuckle wafting over a garden wall, a brief sweet relief from the smell of your tentmate Lucius, who apparently decided that bathing was a civilian luxury he could do without. You've suggested he try the local Roman trick of using olive oil and a metal scraper to clean himself, but he insists that his natural musk keeps the evil eye away. It certainly keeps everyone else away, which is probably why he has so much legroom in the march. The road is perfectly straight here, stretching out like a grey ribbon toward the horizon. This is the first taste of the psychological warfare that is Roman engineering. You can see where you'll be in 2 hours, and it looks exactly like where you are now. It's hypnotic. Your mind starts to drift. You think about the fact that this road was built with the sweat of thousands, many of them soldiers just like you. A quirky bit of trivia you heard once is that some legions actually preferred road building to combat because, while stacking heavy rocks is back-breaking, at least the rocks don't try to cut your head off with a falx. You feel the slight incline as the road begins to rise toward the Alban Hills in the far distance. Your breathing becomes a bit more deliberate. The rhythm of the Caligae is the only thing that matters now. Clack-crunch, clack-crunch. The sound echoes off the stone walls of the tombs that are starting to appear on either side of the road. Because it was illegal to bury the dead inside the city walls, the Appian Way is becoming a literal city of the dead. Grand monuments, marble altars, and small stone houses for the departed line the path. It's a bit macabre, walking through a graveyard that stretches for miles, but in a weird way it's comforting. All these people, the generals, the senators, the freedmen, they all travelled this road once. They all heard this same rhythmic clatter of boots. You're just the pole on your shoulder, feeling the familiar ache beginning to bloom in your traps. You're only an hour into the day, and your body is already reminding you that you're not 20 anymore, even if you are technically only 22. The life of a legionary ages you in dog years. But as you look down at the smooth basalt beneath your feet, you can't help but feel a tiny spark of pride. This road will be here long after you're gone. It's a path through time, and right now, you're the one keeping the beat. The rhythm has settled into your bones now, a steady, pulsing vibration that moves from the soles of your feet up to your jawline. You aren't just walking anymore, you're a single cog in a massive bronze and iron machine. The sound is the most hypnotic part of it all. Clack-crunch, clack-crunch. It's the sound of 5,000 pairs of Caligae meeting the Regina Viarum, the Queen of Roads. If you've ever wondered what it's like to be part of a very slow, very heavily armed percussion ensemble, this is it. The hobnails, those iron studs driven into the thick leather soles of your sandals, don't just sit on the stone, they bite into it. Each step produces a metallic ring that bounces off the basalt and echoes against the low stone walls of the villas passing by. It's the kind of sound that, after 3 hours, starts to feel like a physical weight inside your ears. Let's talk about these shoes for a second, because they are currently the most important thing in your universe. Your Caligae are essentially high-performance military sandals, designed by someone who clearly prioritised not slipping on a bloody hillside over being comfortable at a dinner party. The soles are made of 3 layers of cowhide nearly an inch thick, and they are studded with anywhere from 80 to 100 iron nails. It's basically the ancient Roman version of clog dancing, only if the clog dancers were also carrying 50 pounds of stabbing equipment and hadn't showered in 3 days, you feel every single one of those nails. On the smooth, flat stones of the Appian Way, they provide incredible grip, but they also turn the road into a giant sounding board. Historians still argue whether the standard Roman pace, the gradus, was a universal constant maintained by a rhythmic chant, or if it varied wildly based on the leg length of the centurion leading the line. Looking at the guy in front of you, whose legs are about as long as a goat's, you're leaning toward the latter. The weight of your gear is the other half of this sensory symphony. You are one of Marius's Mules, a nickname given to the legionaries after the reforms of Gaius Marius, who decided that the army would be much more efficient if the soldiers carried all their own gear instead of relying on a slow-moving baggage train. It was a brilliant move for the Empire and a terrible move for your lower back. Your sarcina, the heavy pack on your shoulder, contains everything you need to survive: a leather tent, a mess kit, a week's worth of grain, a spade for digging fortifications, and your personal belongings. It's all tied to a wooden cross pole called a furca. Every time you take a step, the pole shifts slightly, finding a new and creative way to pinch the nerve in your shoulder. It's like being hugged by a very heavy, very pointy wooden ghost. The lorica hamata, your chainmail shirt, adds another layer to the experience. It's made of thousands of interlocking iron rings, and it weighs about 25 pounds. It's surprisingly flexible, which is great for stabbing people, but it also has a tendency to trap the heat. As the sun climbs higher, you can feel the metal warming up, turning your chest into a portable oven. The mail also makes its own sound, a soft metallic shh, as the rings rub against each other, layered over the clack-crunch of the boots. It's a very expensive, very heavy white noise machine. If you ever wondered why Roman ghosts are always heard clanking in old villas, it's probably just their footwear and armour haunting the tiles after a particularly long march. You adjust the strap of your scutum, the massive semi-cylindrical shield hanging on your back. It's made of plywood and leather with a heavy iron boss in the centre. It catches the wind like a sail, and every time a breeze blows through the valley, it tries to pivot you off the road. To keep it steady, you have to lean forward, which shifts the weight of the pilum, your heavy javelin resting on your other shoulder. The pilum is a masterpiece of engineering designed with a soft iron neck that bends upon impact so the enemy can't throw it back at you. Right now, though, it's just a 6-foot-long stick that keeps trying to poke the man behind you in the eye. He's already cursed at you twice in a dialect of Oscan you don't quite understand, but the sentiment was pretty clear. One quirky bit of military trivia you picked up in the barracks is that some soldiers swear by stuffing their caligae with soft wool, or even certain types of broad leaves to prevent the nails from bruising the soles of their feet. You tried the leaf trick once, but you picked the wrong plant and ended up with a rash that made you want to walk on your hands. Now, you just rely on the thick calluses you've built up over years of service. A veteran's feet are essentially made of the same material as a car tyre. Tough, leathery, and smelling faintly of road tar. You notice the man to your left, a grizzly veteran named Marius, has actually sharpened some of the nails on the outer edge of his boots. He claims it gives him better cornering on the wet stone, but you suspect he just likes the idea of being able to kick someone with a serrated edge. The boredom is starting to set in, which is the secret enemy of every soldier. We think of history as a series of epic battles and grand speeches, but for the person living it, it's mostly just walking in a straight line while trying not to think about how much your big toe hurts. To pass the time, you start to analyse the construction of the road itself. You're currently on a section that was refurbished recently. You can tell because the basalt blocks are so tightly fitted that you couldn't slide a dagger between them. This road isn't just a path, it's a statement of ownership. By paving the earth, Rome is saying that even the ground belongs to the emperor. It's a very expensive way to make a point, but then again, Rome was never known for its subtlety. You feel a bead of sweat trickle down your temple, disappearing into the wool of your tunic. The tunic is a rough, unbleached wool that's been dyed a deep madder red. It's scratchy as hell, especially where the lorica presses it against your skin, but it's durable. You've had this one for 2 years, and it's seen everything from the muddy banks of the Rhine to the dusty plains of Iberia. It smells like a combination of old campfire, vinegar, and man, a scent that becomes a permanent part of your identity after the first month in the legions. You've reached a point where you don't even smell yourself anymore, which is a blessing, though you can definitely still smell Lucius. His musk has now reached a level that could probably be classified as a biological weapon. You wonder if the Centurion keeps him in the middle of the formation just to discourage any enemies from attacking the centre. The road continues its relentless straight path. You look ahead, and the column of red and silver stretches out until it vanishes into the heat haze. There's something strangely comforting about the lack of choice. You don't have to decide where to go or how fast to get there. You just have to follow the boots in front of you. Clack-crunch, clack-crunch. The rhythm is your master now. You find yourself matching your breathing to the steps. 4 steps for an inhale, 4 steps for an exhale. It turns the march into a form of moving meditation, a way to drift away from the physical reality of the 50 pounds on your back and the 340 miles left to go. You aren't a man anymore, you're just a heartbeat in the long, stony pulse of the Appian Way. The sun is higher now, casting short, sharp shadows that dance around your feet with every stride. As you march, you find yourself looking down at the road itself, really looking at it, and it occurs to you that you aren't just walking on a path, you're walking on a multi-layered geological miracle. You've seen the construction crews near the city gates, slaves, labourers, and sometimes even disgraced legionaries, digging deep into the earth. They don't just lay stones on top of the dirt and call it a day. That would be the barbarian way. No, the Roman way involves treating the ground like a mortal enemy that needs to be subdued and buried under several feet of structural spite. If you were to take a shovel and dig a hole right where you're standing, which you won't because the Centurion would likely have you lashed for unauthorised landscaping, you'd find that this road goes deep. It's like an iceberg. What you see on the surface is only a fraction of the mass. First they dig a trench, the fossa, down to the solid bedrock, or at least a firm subsoil. Then comes the statumen, a layer of large, fist-sized stones cemented together with mortar. On top of that, they pack down the rudus, a thick layer of rubble and lime that's been pounded until it's as hard as a politician's heart. Then comes the nucleus, a fine mixture of broken tiles, sand and gravel. Finally, they cap it with these massive interlocking basalt blocks called the summum dorsum. It's effectively a mountain that has been flattened, polished and laid out in a straight line. Historians still argue whether the distinct curvatura, the slight arch or camber of the road's surface, was designed primarily for drainage to keep the stones from shifting in the rain, or if it was a deliberate structural choice to prevent heavy wagon axles from locking up during high-speed transit. Either way it works. Even after a torrential downpour, the Appian Way stays dry while the fields on either side turn into a soup of mud and regret. You notice the drainage ditches, the fossae, running parallel to the road, expertly carved to whisk away every drop of water. The Romans don't just build, they manage the elements. If the gods send a flood, the Roman engineer simply points to a different ditch and tells the water to go stand over there. You think about the sheer amount of material moved to make this happen. A mainstream historical fact that always blows your mind is that the Appian Way was the first long-distance Roman road to be fully paved in stone. Before this, roads were mostly just levelled earth or gravel. When Appius Claudius started this project, people probably thought he was insane for spending that much money on fancy rocks, but here you are, 3 centuries later, and the stones haven't moved an inch. It makes modern Roman life feel a bit fragile by comparison. Your apartment in the city has a ceiling that leaks if someone upstairs sneezes too hard, yet this road could probably support the weight of a mountain. There's a quirky, almost obsessive-compulsive detail you've noticed about the way the stones are fitted. In some sections, the gaps are so small that the Roman engineers used a specific type of volcanic ash from the Pozzuoli region, known as pozzolana, which creates a hydraulic cement that actually hardens underwater. They didn't just want a road, They wanted a permanent scar on the face of the earth. You've heard a fringe theory from a drunk surveyor in a tavern once. He claimed that the engineers used secret sighting tools called gromus to align the road with specific star constellations, and that if you walked the whole thing at a perfect pace, you'd be in sync with the harmony of the spheres. You're currently in sync with the harmony of Lucius's knees, popping every 3 seconds, which is a significantly less celestial experience. Speaking of Lucius, he's currently trying to adjust his pack without stopping, which results in a series of undignified wobbles. If the Roman army were a homeowners association, Lucius would definitely be the guy getting fined for having a messy lawn. You give him a gentle nudge with your elbow to keep him in line. "Keep your eyes on the basalt, Lucius," you mutter. "The stones are the only thing in this empire that aren't going to let you down today." He grunts in response, a sound that is roughly 40% exhaustion and 60% garlic breath. The road feels different under your feet depending on the age of the section. Here, the stones are smooth and dark, reflecting the sunlight in a way that makes your eyes ache. Occasionally, you pass a spot where a block has cracked, and you can see the sheer thickness of it, often over a foot deep. It's a testament to the fact that for Romans, good enough was a foreign concept. If you can build it so it lasts 1,000 years, why settle for 500? It's a very expensive way to ensure that future generations will have a really easy time invading you. But for now, it just means you don't have to worry about potholes. You find yourself wondering about the people who actually laid these stones. Did they realise they were building something eternal? Or were they just thinking about when their shift ended and where they could find a cold cup of Posca? Probably the latter. History is built by people who are mostly just looking forward to lunch. But as you look at the way the stones curve perfectly to follow the contour of the land while maintaining that relentless southward trajectory, you feel a begrudging respect for the bureaucracy. It takes a very specific kind of organised madness to convince an entire civilization that the shortest distance between 2 points is a multi-layered, stone-clad engineering project that costs as much as a small war. Your mind starts to play a game. You try to step only on the centres of the basalt blocks, avoiding the seams. It's a child's game, don't step on the crack, but it keeps the boredom at bay. Clack, clack, clack. It's harder than it looks when you're carrying a 50-pound pack and keeping pace with 1,000 other men. You realise that the stones are slightly worn in the centre, smoothed down by millions of footsteps and thousands of iron-rimmed wheels over the years. You are literally walking in the groove of history. Every merchant, every messenger, and every legionary that came before you has contributed to this subtle wearing away of the rock. You aren't just a traveller, you're a piece of sandpaper slowly helping to polish the Queen of Roads. The heat is starting to radiate back up from the stone now. Basalt is great for durability, but it's a champion at soaking up the sun. You can feel the warmth through the thick leather of your caligy. It's like walking on a very slow, very large griddle. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen someone mentioned back at the barracks as a joke? Right now, you'd almost consider it if it provided even a hint of cooling. But there is no shade on the road. The trees have been cleared back from the shoulders to prevent ambushes, leaving you exposed to the vast open sky. You just have to trust in the engineering beneath you. The road doesn't care if you're hot. The road doesn't care if you're tired. It just provides the foundation, solid and unyielding, stretching out toward a horizon that never seems to get any closer. The heat from the basalt stones is still rising, but the scenery is shifting from the sprawling greenery of suburban villas to something a bit more permanent. You are now entering the long, silent corridor of the dead. It's one of the most striking features of the Appian Way, and if you weren't so focused on the rhythmic clack-crunch of your boots, it might even be a little intimidating. On both sides of the road, stretching for miles, the elite of Rome have built their final homes. Because of the ancient laws of the 12 Tables, a mainstream historical fact you might remember from your basic schooling, it is strictly forbidden to bury or cremate the dead within the city walls or the pomerium. So that if you want to be remembered, You have to set up shop right here, on the busiest highway in the world, where every traveller, merchant and weary soldier has no choice but to look at your face. It's essentially a high-stakes competition in post-mortem real estate. To your left is a towering circular monument that looks more like a fortress than a grave. To your right, a modest marble altar tucked under a cypress tree. The wealthy Romans didn't just want a quiet resting place. They wanted a billboard. They wanted you, as you trudge past with 50 pounds of gear, to stop and think, wow, Marcus Aurelius, whatever his name was, must have been a really big deal. It's the original flex, frozen in stone. You pass the tomb of Cassilia Metella, a massive drum of travertine that's so sturdy you suspect it'll still be standing when the sun goes out. Historians still argue whether the sheer scale of these monuments was purely about family prestige, or if they served as literal landmarks and watchtowers for the Roman postal service to navigate by. You find yourself reading the epitaphs as you pass, your eyes darting from the road to the inscriptions and back again. Most of them are standard "I was a good father and a brave citizen" types, but some are surprisingly personal. You pass one for a man who apparently really loved his dog, and another where the deceased spends 3 paragraphs complaining about how his heirs are probably going to waste all his money on bad wine and fast horses. It's a bit like scrolling through an ancient version of a social media feed, only instead of likes, these people are fishing for remembrances from strangers with sore feet. There's a quirky tidbit you heard once. Some of these tombs actually have small pipe leading from the surface down to the burial chamber, so that family members can pour wine directly into the grave during festivals. You imagine the ghosts down there, perpetually slightly buzzed on a vintage from 3 years ago, listening to the never-ending thud of legionary boots above them. The air feels different here. Colder, perhaps, or maybe it's just the shadow cast by the towering monuments. The cypress trees, those tall, dark sentinels of the Mediterranean, line the route, their scent mixing with the dry dust kicked up by the column. You adjust your furca, the wooden crosspole biting into your shoulder, and catch a glimpse of your reflection in a polished marble slab. You look tired, dusty, and remarkably alive compared to your neighbours. There's a certain irony in it. You, a soldier whose life is essentially a series of high-risk gambles for the state, walking past the most secure and expensive real estate in Italy. You're carrying your entire world on your back, while these people are trying to take their entire bank account into the underworld. Speaking of keeping things secure, remember that crocodile dung sunscreen we joked about earlier? Looking at the weathered faces of some of these marble statues, you think they could have used some. Some of the older busts have lost their noses to the elements, giving them a tragic Voldemort-like appearance that makes you want to stifle a laugh. You have to be careful, though. The centurion doesn't like unauthorized mirth in the ranks, especially when passing the tombs of influential families. He's currently glaring at a particularly ornate sarcophagus, as if he's considering ticketing it for obstructing the view. The road is so straight here that the tombs look like they're marching right along with you, a silent audience to your daily grind. You wonder if the ghosts ever get annoyed by the noise. Clack-crunch, clack-crunch. It's a relentless sound, 5,000 men creating a rhythmic thunder that hasn't stopped for centuries and won't stop as long as Rome has borders to defend. If you were a ghost, you would probably be shouting for everyone to keep it down out there. But then again, maybe they enjoy the company. It's a lonely thing being a monument on a dusty road. You pass the tomb of a man named Eurysaces the baker. It's one of the weirdest things you've ever seen, a giant stone monument decorated with circular holes that represent grain measuring vessels. It's a literal monument to bread. It's a reminder that in Rome it doesn't matter if you're a general or a guy who made really good sourdough. If you have enough denarii, you can build a stone bread bin for your soul and make everyone in the army look at it. You find yourself wondering if he was buried with a baguette, or if that's just wishful thinking because your own rations of hardtack are starting to look very unappealing. The repetition of the march is starting to blur the monuments together. A marble arch here, a stone bench there. a relief of a lady in a stola over there. You find yourself drifting into a light trance, the marching fever, where your legs move on autopilot and your brain retreats to a quiet corner to think about nothing at all. The tombs become a grey and white blur in your peripheral vision. You aren't really in the city of the dead anymore, you're just in the middle of the road. The transition from the living city to the silent monuments was gradual, and now the transition toward the open countryside is beginning. The tombs are getting smaller, the gaps between them wider. The prestige of being buried near Rome is directly proportional to how close you are to the gates, and you've clearly moved into the budget seating of the afterlife. Still, the engineering of the road remains flawless. The stones beneath your caligay are still perfectly fitted, even out here where the traffic is supposedly lighter. It's a comfort, in a way. The dead might be silent, but the road is a living thing, a pulse that connects the heart of the empire to its furthest reaches. You take a deep breath, the dusty air filling your lungs, and settle back into the rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 4. You aren't just walking past history, you are the active breathing part of it, the kinetic energy that makes all this stone and marble mean something. Without the soldiers, the Appian Way is just a very long, very expansive graveyard. With you, it's a nervous system. You see a small lizard scuttling across a marble inscription, pausing for a second on the name of a long-dead consul before vanishing into a crack in the basalt. It's a small reminder that nature doesn't care about your monuments or your empires. But for now, you do. You have to. You have another 10 miles to cover before the sun hits the horizon, and the dead are the only ones who get to rest early. You give a silent nod to a nameless statue of a woman holding a laurel wreath. Adjust your shield one last time and keep your eyes on the heels of the man in front of you. The silent audience is behind you now. The open road is all that's left. The tombs are thinning out now, the grand marble billboards of the dead giving way to rolling fields of wheat and olive groves that shimmer in the midday heat. But while the scenery is opening up, your world is actually getting smaller. When you're marching in a consular army of 2 legion, you aren't really travelling through Italy. You are travelling inside a giant, mobile, bronze-plated city. Logistics is the invisible hand that keeps you from collapsing into a heap of hungry, frustrated leather, and it's a miracle of bureaucracy that would make a modern supply chain manager weep with envy. You aren't just a guy with a sword, you're a unit of consumption, and your daily life is governed by a schedule so tight it's a wonder you have time to blink. A mainstream historical fact that often gets lost in the shuffle of great battles is that the Roman army's real secret weapon wasn't the gladius, but the shovel. For every hour you spend marching, you'll spend another 2 digging. You are part of a contubernium, a tent group of 8 men who live, eat and sleep together. You share everything: a single leather tent, a heavy stone hand mill for grinding grain, and a single mule that carries the heaviest gear. You've named your mule Senator because he's stubborn, makes a lot of noise, and refuses to carry his fair share of the burden. That's joke number 1 for the day. And Lucius didn't even crack a smile, probably because he's currently trying to stop Senator from biting his shoulder. The coordination required to keep this column moving is staggering. Think about it. 5,000 men, plus the cavalry, plus the officers on their horses, plus the baggage train of mules. If the guy at the front stops to tie his sandal, a mile-long ripple effect of clanking metal and swearing happens behind him. To manage this, the Legion moves in a very specific order. There's the vanguard of scouts and auxiliary cavalry, then the main body, and finally the rear guard. You have to maintain a precise distance from the man in front of you. Not too close or you'll trip over his heels. Not too far or the column loses its structural integrity. It's like a giant angry centipede made of iron and bad attitudes. As the sun reaches its zenith, the thirst starts to become a physical ache. This is where the posca comes in. Forget about the fine age wines you see in the movies. Your Gatorade is a mixture of water and sour low-quality vinegar. It sounds disgusting, and it is, but it's actually a brilliant piece of Roman logistics. The vinegar kills the bacteria in the local water supplies and provides a quick hit of energy. It's the ultimate quirky tidbit of legionary life. The most powerful army on Earth was essentially fueled by salad dressing. You take a swig from your leather canteen, the sharp acidic tang cutting through the dust in your throat. It doesn't taste good, but it makes you feel like you could punch a hole through a mountain, or at least keep walking for another 4 hours. Around mid-afternoon, the word starts to filter back through the ranks. The Metataurs have found the site. These are the specialist surveyors who ride ahead to pick the location for the night's camp. This is where the marching part of your day ends, and the construction worker part begins. Historians still argue whether the Roman army truly built a full fortified camp every single night regardless of the danger, or if they sometimes just roughed it with a simple perimeter when they were in friendly territory like the heart of Italy. Your aching back, however, knows the truth. Your centurion is a stickler for the manual, which means tonight you're digging. Building the castra is a choreographed dance of exhaustion. As soon as you reach the designated spot, the perimeter is marked out. Each sentry knows exactly which section of the wall they are responsible for. You drop your pack, sweet, sweet relief, but you don't sit down. You grab your delabra, the heavy bronze pickaxe mattock that every soldier carries. You start digging the fossa, the ditch that surrounds the camp. The dirt you pull out is piled up to form the agger, the rampart. On top of that, you drive in your valley, the 2 sharpened wooden stakes you've been carrying on your pack all day. There's a certain grim irony in the fact that your rest involves moving several tons of earth. If a civilian saw the speed at which a legion can turn an empty field into a fortified city, they'd think it was sorcery. It's pure logistics. Every man knows his role. While you're digging, 2 men from your contubernium are setting up the tent, and another is starting the fire to cook the evening meal. If you ever wondered why Romans were so good at conquering the world, it wasn't just because they were better at fighting. It's because they were the only people who would spend 3 hours building a wall just to sleep behind it for 8 hours. Speaking of dinner, don't expect a feast. You don't get rations in the modern sense, you get a bag of grain. You and your tent mates take turns sitting at the heavy stone handmill, grinding the wheat into a coarse flour. It's a tedious, arm-numbing task that you usually do while staring blankly at the campfire. Once the flour is ready, you boil it with water and maybe a bit of lard or salt to make pulse, a thick porridge that has the consistency and flavour of wet cardboard. If you're lucky, maybe you found some wild onions or leeks by the road to toss in. It's a meal designed for fuel, not enjoyment. You eat it out of a wooden bowl, scraping every last bit of the grey sludge, because you know you'll need those calories for the 20 miles waiting for you tomorrow. The discipline is what keeps the logistics from falling apart. There's a joke among the ranks that the only thing more dangerous than a Gaulish axe is a Roman quartermaster with a clipboard. Everything is accounted for. If you lose your spade, you're in trouble. If you waste your grain, you go hungry. It creates a sense of shared responsibility that binds the contubernium together more tightly than any speech from a general ever could. You look around at your 7 companions huddled around the small fire. They're dusty, they're cranky, and they smell like a wet dog that's been rolling in vinegar. But they're your family. As the stars begin to poke through the deepening blue of the Italian sky, the camp settles into a hum of low-frequency activity. The sentries are posted, the password for the night, something like Venus or Fortuna, is passed along, and the rest of you crawl into the leather tent. It's cramped, and if anyone has to roll over, everyone has to roll over. You lie there on your thin bedroll, the smell of the leather and your comrades filling your senses. Your feet are throbbing, and your shoulder is a map of dull pain, but the logistics of the day are complete. You are fed, you are sheltered, and you are safe behind a wall of your own making. The Queen of Roads is just a few hundred yards away, silent and silver in the moonlight, waiting for the sun to rise, so the whole machine can start all over again. The solid, reassuring thud of basalt under your boots is starting to change. For the last few miles, the Queen of Roads has been flirting with the edge of the world's most stubborn puddle, the Pontine Marshes. This isn't just a bit of damp ground, it's a vast, sprawling labyrinth of reeds, stagnant water and mud that seems to have a personal vendetta against the concept of dry feet. The air here is different. It's thick, heavy, and carries the distinct bouquet of rotting vegetation and sulphur. If Rome is the heart of civilization, the Pontine Marshes are its sweaty, mosquito-infested armpit. You can feel the humidity clinging to your wool tunic like a damp, itchy ghost. And suddenly that heavy chainmail shirt feels less like protection and more like a portable sauna. A mainstream historical fact you'll learn quickly is that these marshes were the bane of every traveller's existence for centuries. They were a hotbed for what the Romans called Roman fever, which we now know as malaria. The Romans didn't understand the science of mosquitoes yet. They blamed miasma or bad air, but they certainly understood that spending too much time here was a great way to end up as a permanent resident in one of those fancy tombs we passed earlier. Because the road here frequently sank into the muck or became impassable during the rainy season, the engineers built a legendary workaround, the Deccan Novium. This is a 19-mile straight-shot canal that runs parallel to the road, and for a few sesterces, you can trade the clack-crunch of the march for the slow, swaying glide of a canal boat. Your sentry has been authorised to use the barges to speed up the transit of heavy gear, which means you get to experience the pinnacle of Roman luxury travel. Imagine a flat-bottomed wooden barge packed tightly with soldiers and mules that you're practically wearing the man next to you as a scarf. There are no oars. Instead, a long rope connects the boat to a pair of disgruntled mules walking along the towpath on the bank. It is the slowest express service in human history. One quirky tidbit about this journey, famously recorded by the poet Horace, is that the boatmen are notoriously lazy and the passengers are notoriously cranky. Horace complained that the gnats and the loud croaking frogs made sleep impossible, and the mule drivers would often stop the boat in the middle of the night just to let the mules graze, leaving everyone stranded in the dark with the bugs. Speaking of bugs, the mosquitoes here are not the small, polite variety you might find in a city garden. These are Roman imperial mosquitoes, large, aggressive, and seemingly equipped with their own tiny sets of lorica segmentata. They view your exposed neck as an all-you-can-eat buffet. You've tried rubbing a bit of old garlic on your skin, but all that's done is make you smell like a fermented kitchen, and the mosquitoes seem to actually enjoy the seasoning. It's joke number 1 for the marsh. You aren't being bitten, you're being taxed by the local winged provincial governors. You'd swat them, but every time you move your arm, you hit Lucius in the helmet, and he's already in a foul mood because the boat swaying is making his marsh porridge dinner want to make a reappearance. Historians still argue whether the Decenovium Canal was a masterpiece of proactive engineering, or a desperate, expensive admission of failure by the Roman state. Some believe it was intended as a permanent solution for heavy freight, while others argue it was only maintained because they couldn't figure out how to keep the actual road from disappearing into the swamp every 5 years. Regardless of the scholarly debate, as you sit on a pile of leather tents, watching the endless wall of green reeds drift by at the blistering speed of a wounded turtle, you don't care about the why. You just want to be back on solid stone. The water in the canal is the colour of old pea soup and smells twice as bad. Occasionally a large water snake ripples across the surface and you find yourself checking the seal on your bootstraps very, very carefully. The scenery is another trial. In the Alban Hills you had vistas and grand villas. Here you have reeds. To the left, reeds. To the right, more reeds. Occasionally a heron will take flight, its wings flapping with a heavy wet sound that cuts through the humid silence. It's incredibly boring, which is a dangerous thing for a soldier. Boredom leads to marsh madness, where you start finding the rhythmic slosh-slosh of the water against the hull fascinating. You find yourself staring at a dragonfly for 20 minutes, wondering if it has a better retirement plan than you do. That's joke number 2. The dragonfly doesn't have to carry a pilum, but then again, its career trajectory is significantly shorter, so maybe it's a wash. The heat is the real killer. Without the breeze of a marching pace, the sun just sits on you. The metal of your helmet is getting hot enough to fry an egg on. Not that you have an egg, though you'd probably trade your shield for one right now. You try to find a patch of shade under the barge's small canopy, but that's reserved for the centurion and his favourite vine staff. You just have to sit there and baste in your own sweat. You think back to those Roman spas back in the city. The cool water of the frigidarium, the scented oils, the marble floors. Right now, this canal feels like a spa treatment, designed by a demon who specialises in humidity and itchy wool. That's joke number 3, though. Nobody's laughing because their tongues are currently stuck to the roofs of their mouths. Despite the misery, there is a strange, haunting beauty to the marshes if you look closely. The way the light hits the water at dusk, turning the stagnant pools into shimmering sheets of copper, is almost enough to make you forget the malaria. Almost. You see the ruins of an old Republican-era bridge peeking out of the mud, a reminder that the Romans have been fighting this swamp for centuries. They build, the swamp swallows, they build again, the swamp sighs and waits. It's a war of attrition, where the enemy is the earth itself. It reminds you that being a Roman soldier isn't just about fighting Gauls or Parthians, it's about the relentless, stubborn imposition of order on a chaotic world. As the sun finally begins to dip below the horizon, the frogs begin their nightly chorus. It's a deafening, rhythmic brek-kek-kek that fills the air, drowning out even the swearing of the mule drivers. You can see the flickering lights of Forum Appii in the distance, the small town at the end of the canal. It's a rough, tumble-down place filled with sailors, tavern keepers, and people who have lived in the marshes so long they've started to look a bit like bullfrogs themselves. But to you, it looks like paradise. It means the end of the swaying barge and the return to the solid, predictable basalt of the Appian Way. You adjust your pack, feeling the familiar weight, and prepare for the awkward scramble from the boat to the muddy pier. You've survived the marshes, or at least the first half of them. You're damp, you're covered in bug bites, and you smell like a swamp monster's gym bag. But you're still moving south. The Queen of Roads is waiting for you on the other side of the mud, and for the first time in your life you actually miss the sound of your own boots hitting the stone. The damp, clinging humidity of the marshes finally begins to peel away as you step back onto the high, dry embankment of the Appian Way. Your boots make that glorious clack-crunch once more, and for a moment, the solid basalt feels like the softest goose-down mattress in the Empire. But your stomach is currently playing a very loud, very angry solo, reminding you that marsh mist and a handful of dry crackers don't exactly constitute a balanced diet for a man carrying half his body weight in iron. Ahead, shimmering in the heat haze of the late afternoon, is a cluster of low stone buildings. This is Amancio, one of the official stopping stations spaced out along the road. And if you're lucky, it might have a taberna, a Roman roadside tavern, that doesn't serve food that looks back at you. Stepping into a Roman tavern is an assault on every sense you possess. The first thing you hit is the smell. A thick, swirling fog of wood smoke, cheap wine, roasted onions, and the eye-watering tang of garum. A mainstream historical fact you'll quickly learn is that the Roman world ran on garum, a fermented fish sauce made by leaving fish guts to rot in the sun with salt. It sounds like a biological weapon, but to a Roman, it's the nectar of the gods. They put it on everything: bread, vegetables, even fruit. It's essentially the ancient world's answer to ketchup if ketchup were made of liquidized sea despair. You catch a whiff of a simmering stew in the corner, and the garum is so strong it practically singes your nose hairs. But you're so hungry you'd probably eat a leather sandal if it had enough salt on it. The tavern is crowded. Merchants in dusty tunics are arguing over the price of grain. A messenger from the Cursus Publicus is slumped in a corner nursing a cup of wine. And a group of local farmers are playing a loud, aggressive game of tally, knuckle-bone dice, on a grease-stained table. You find a spot on a backless wooden bench and drop your pack with a thud that makes the floorboards groan. Your centurion has given the at ease for an hour, which is just enough time to trade a few sesterces for something that isn't a grey lump of porridge. The menu, and I use that term very loosely, is usually whatever is in the big earthenware pots sitting on the stone counter. Historians still argue whether these tabernae were part of a strictly regulated imperial network designed to support the state's logistics, or if they were just opportunistic private businesses popping up like mushrooms to fleece anyone with a coin purse. Looking at the innkeeper, a man whose face looks like a topographical map of a very rocky province, you're leaning toward the opportunist theory. He offers you a bowl of special stew. That's joke number one. In a Roman tavern, special usually means the things we found in the alleyway that didn't run away fast enough. You don't ask what's in it, you just start eating. It actually tastes surprisingly good. Or maybe you're just 3 minutes away from starving to death. There's salt, some wild herbs, and chunks of what might be pork, all swimming in a thick red wine-based broth. To wash it down, you get a cup of the local wine. Now, Roman wine isn't like the bottled stuff you see today. It's thick, syrupy, and usually needs to be watered down unless you want to wake up tomorrow morning thinking your head has been used for target practice by a ballista. The tavern keeper has probably watered this down with a ratio of 1 part wine to 4 parts water from a bucket that may or may not have had a duck in it. But it's wet and it's cold, so you don't complain. One quirky or fringe tidbit about these roadside stops is that they weren't just for eating. Many taverns had upstairs rooms that were notorious for being less than sanitary. There's a persistent fringe theory among some archaeologists that Roman tavern owners would actually use loaded dice, weighted with lead, to swindle weary travellers out of their pay during late-night gambling sessions. You watch the farmers at the next table carefully. One of them is throwing Venus, the highest roll, a bit too consistently for your liking. You decide to keep your sesterces in your pouch and your hand on your Pugio dagger. As you eat, you look at your panis militaris, the hard circular loaf of military bread you've been carrying. It's dense enough to be used as a backup shield and has the nutritional profile of a brick. You dip a piece into the stew, letting it soak up the juices until it's soft enough to chew without breaking a tooth. This is the reality of the march. Long stretches of brick bread and vinegar water, punctuated by these brief chaotic moments of tavern luxury. It makes you appreciate the small things, like a bowl of stew that doesn't have any obvious gravel in it. That's joke number 2. Roman luxury is just any meal where you don't have to pick a beetle out of your teeth before you swallow. The atmosphere in this tavern is getting rowdier. A traveller in a fine wool cloak is complaining loudly that the bed in his room is stuffed with angry straw, and that the local wildlife, by which he means the bedbugs, are organised enough to have their own centurion. You stifle a laugh. He's clearly not a soldier. If you can sleep on a damp leather tent floor with Lucius snoring like a broken pipe, a few bedbugs are just a minor distraction. You catch Lucius's eye across the table. He's currently trying to bribe the tavern keeper for a second helping of stew by offering to trade a slightly used, only once dropped whetstone. The tavern keeper looks unimpressed. The social hierarchy of the Appian Way is on full display here. In one corner you see a wealthy senator's steward, dressed in silks that cost more than your entire decade of service, looking down his nose at everyone. In the other, a group of dusty labourers are sharing a single loaf of bread and a bowl of olives. The road is a great equaliser, but the tavern reminds you that even in the middle of nowhere, Rome is a city of layers. You're somewhere in the middle, respected because of the uniform, but still just a guy with sore feet and a limited budget. You finish your meal and lean back against the wall, closing your eyes for a precious 5 minutes. The sound of the tavern, the clinking of cups, the shouting, the rhythmic thud of a meat cleaver in the back starts to blur into a dull hum. You think about the thousands of miles of roads just like this one, crisscrossing the empire, each with its own string of taverns and its own smells of rotting fish sauce. It's a massive, sprawling network that keeps the world moving. Without these greasy spoons of the ancient world, the legions would stop, the messengers would fail, and the Empire would probably just go home and take a nap. Your centurion's whistle pierces through the tavern's din. It's time to move. You stand up, feeling the weight of the stew in your belly and the familiar ache of your muscles as they protest the return to duty. You grab your pack, give the tavern keeper a nod of begrudging respect for not poisoning you, and head back out into the sun. The Queen of Rhodes is waiting, its basalt stones ready to receive the iron rhythm of your boots once more. You've had your moment of fine dining, now it is back to the posca and the road. That's joke number 3. You came for the atmosphere, but you're staying for the 300 miles of manual labour. The sun has reached its most tyrannical height, hanging directly overhead like a polished brass shield. There are no shadows now, just a flat, oppressive glare that turns the basalt of the Appian Way into a massive thermal battery. You can feel the heat radiating through the thick soles of your collegae, warming your feet until you're convinced you can smell your own skin roasting. This is the midday slump, that brutal stretch between 10 and 2, where the march stops being a rhythmic exercise and starts being a test of psychological endurance. Your world has shrunk to a very small, very sweaty radius. The back of the man's neck in front of you, the repetitive clack of your boots, and the shimmering mirage of water dancing on the road 100 yards ahead. A mirage that, like a promotion in the legions, always stays just out of reach. A mainstream historical fact about Roman military life is that heat exhaustion was often a bigger threat than the enemy's spear. The legions didn't have the luxury of air conditioning or moisture-wicking fabrics. You're encased in layers of wool and iron, and your body is essentially an oven. To combat this, the Roman army didn't just rely on stamina. They relied on a specific marching pace designed to maximise distance without triggering a total physical collapse. You're currently moving at the Iter Iustum, the regular march, which covers about 18 to 20 miles in 5 hours. If the general were in a hurry, he'd call for the Grandis Gradus, a forced march that would have you literally running in your armour. Right now, you're just grateful that the commander seems to be as tired as you are, even if he is riding a horse. The physical toll is starting to manifest in the sway. You see it in the men around you, a slight rhythmic tilt from side to side as they try to shift the weight of the sarcina from one sore muscle group to another. Your shoulder is no longer just aching, it has entered a state of profound philosophical protest. You've adjusted the crosspole so many times today that you've run out of positions. There's a quirky fringe tidbit about Roman soldiers using shoulder pads made of folded sheepskin or even dried sponges to cushion the weight of the furca. You didn't bother with a sponge this morning, thinking you were too tough for such comforts. Now you'd trade your left kidney for a particularly soft piece of moss. That's joke number 1. You're so desperate for padding that you're starting to look at Lucius's unshaven, fuzzy neck with genuine envy. Historians still argue whether the legendary discipline of the Roman march was maintained through a sense of patriotic duty, or the very real, very present threat of the vitis, the centurion's vine staff. Your centurion, a man whose face looks like it was carved out of a particularly grumpy oak tree, is currently pacing the line. He isn't sweating, he isn't panting, he is just watching. Every time he sees a gap in the ranks or a man's shield dipping too low, that vine staff starts twitching. It's a powerful motivator. You find that you can actually ignore a lot of physical pain, when the alternative is a piece of wood being applied to your ribcage with the force of a catapult. The silence of the column is heavy now. Gone is the chatter about taverns or the jokes about the emperor's latest haircut. The only sounds are the rhythmic clank of armour, the heavy breathing of thousands of men, and the occasional discordant thwack of a fly hitting a metal helmet. You try to play mental games to pass the time, you count the stones, you try to remember the lyrics to that dirty song the soldiers from the 10th Legion were singing in the tavern last night. You realise you've forgotten the chorus, and spend the next 3 miles trying to make up new rhymes for Teutoburg Forest. It's a losing battle. Your brain is currently running on about 10% capacity, with the other 90% dedicated to keeping your legs moving in a straight line. You take another sip of your posca. It's warm now, almost the temperature of blood, and it has a distinct metallic aftertaste from the canteen. But the vinegar still provides that sharp, bracing kick to your senses. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen joke from back near Rome? Honestly, at this point you probably rub anything on your face if you thought it would stop the sun from peeling the skin off your nose. You look over at Lucius. He's gone a shade of red that matches his tunic, and he's staring at the road with a look of such intense concentration that you think he might be trying to move the basalt blocks with his mind. That's joke number 2. If Lucius could use telekinesis, he wouldn't use it to move the stones. He'd use it to bring that wine jug from 3 miles back into his hand. One of the strangest things about marching in the midday sun is how it distorts your perception of distance. The Appian Way is so straight, so perfect that you can see for miles. You see a small hill in the distance and think, we'll be there in 20 minutes. An hour later, the hill looks exactly the same size. It's a psychological grind. The road is a treadmill made of stone. You start to feel like you're not actually moving, but that the earth is just scrolling beneath your feet while you stay in the same hot, dusty spot. It's a very expensive, very ancient version of a gym session that you never signed up for. Despite the exhaustion, there is a weird sense of pride that starts to bubble up during the toughest miles. You look down the line and see the eagles of the Legion, the Aquila, bobbing ahead in the sun. That golden bird represents the power of Rome, but it's carried by guys like you, guys with blisters, guys who are thirsty, guys who are currently wondering why they didn't just become bakers. You are the muscle that moves the empire. Every mile you conquer is a mile where Roman law and Roman order are being reinforced. You aren't just a traveller, you're a walking boundary line. As the sun finally begins its slow descent toward the west, the intensity of the heat starts to break. A tiny, hesitant breeze flits across the road, cooling the sweat on your neck. It's the most beautiful feeling in the world. You feel a sudden renewed burst of energy. Not much, but enough to straighten your back and tighten your grip on the pilum. You've survived the worst of the day. You've played the mental game with the sun, and through sheer stubborn Roman grit, you've won. That's joke number 3. The sun tried to kill you, but it forgot that you've been through 3 years of basic training under a man who thinks mercy is a type of foreign vegetable. The light is turning golden now, softening the harsh edges of the landscape. The basalt blocks beneath your feet seem to glow with a dull inner warmth. You're still tired, your feet are still throbbing, and you still have a few miles to go before you can even think about digging a ditch, but the midday sun is behind you. You adjust your helmet, take a deep breath of the cooling air, and fall back into the rhythm. Clack-crunch, clack-crunch. The heartbeat of the road continues, and so do you. As the afternoon shadows begin to stretch and lean across the basalt, you notice that the road is becoming a bit more crowded. Up until now, you've mostly been surrounded by the red tunics and iron helmets of your own kind, but the Appian Way is a public artery, and the social hierarchy of Rome is currently parading right past your left shoulder. Because the road is wide enough to accommodate two-way traffic, you frequently have to shift the column to the edge to make room for the big players. A mainstream historical fact of Roman life is that the road was the only place where a peasant, a legionary, and a senator might actually breathe the same dust, though they certainly wouldn't be doing it on equal terms. The VIPs of the road travel in a way that makes your march look like a punishment from the gods. You hear them before you see them, the jingle of silver-mounted harnesses and the rhythmic shouting of outrunners. Suddenly, a lectica, or litter, carried by 8 burly slaves, glides past the column. Inside, behind silk curtains, sits a wealthy official or a high-ranking noble. They are likely reclining on goose-down cushions, reading a scroll or napping, completely shielded from the sun that has been baking your brain for the last 6 hours. It's a bit of a reality check. You are the one protecting the Empire's borders, but this guy is the one enjoying the Empire's upholstery. That's joke number 1. You're carrying 50 pounds of iron and he's carrying a slight grudge because his grapes weren't chilled properly this morning. Following the litter is often a raider, a heavy four-wheeled carriage packed with the noble's family, their luggage, and probably a few terrified house slaves clinging to the back. These carriages are the reason the Appian Way has those deep ruts in certain sections. Even the hardest basalt eventually bows to the pressure of a senator's travel wardrobe. Historians still argue whether the Roman government imposed speed limits or weight restrictions on these private vehicles to protect the road's surface, or if the only real law was get out of the way of the guy with the most bodyguards. Based on the way your centurion just barked at you to move aside for a passing magistrate, you're betting on the latter. There's a quirky or fringe tidbit you noticed earlier. Many of the elite travellers actually carry road maps, called itineraria. These aren't maps like we think of them today with topographical features. They are long, skinny scrolls that just list the distances between towns and the quality of the inns. Some fringe theorists suggest that these scrolls even included ratings for taverns, essentially making them the ancient world's version of a travel app. You imagine a senator's scribe scrawling a note: avoid the Inn of the Two Swans, the wine tastes like horse sweat and the bedbugs have a union. You of course don't need a map. Your map is the back of Eurysaces' head and the constant nagging pain in your left arch. The contrast between the travellers is stark. Behind the wealthy carriage comes a group of barefoot pilgrims headed to a local shrine, followed by a Greek merchant leading a string of donkeys laden with amphorae of expensive olive oil. The merchant looks at your legionary gear with a mix of respect and practiced invisibility. He knows that you are the reason he can travel these 300 miles without being kidnapped by bandits, but he also knows that soldiers have a creative interpretation of property rights when they're hungry. You give him a look that says, "I'm too tired to even think about stealing your oil," and he gives you a nod that says, "I appreciate that more than you know." One of the more interesting sights is the carpentum, a two-wheeled covered carriage often used by high-ranking Roman matrons. You catch a glimpse of a woman through the window, her hair piled high in an architectural marvel of curls and gold pins. She looks bored. You are literally sweating through your mail, and she looks like she's waiting for a particularly slow play to finish. It reminds you that for some people, the Appian Way isn't a journey, it's just a long, boring hallway between two houses. That's joke number 2. She's worried about her hair being ruined by the dust, while you're worried about your feet becoming a permanent part of your sandals. The hierarchy even extends to the animals. The horses of the cavalry and the officers are sleek, well-fed creatures that look like they spend their nights being tucked into silk blankets. Your mule, senator, looks like he was assembled from spare parts found in a swamp. He's currently trying to eat the decorative tassel off a passing merchant's cloak. You have to yank on his ear to keep him from causing an international incident. There's a joke among the men that the cavalry gets more hay than the infantry gets grain, and looking at the centurion's horse, you're starting to think it's not a joke at all. That's joke number 3. The horse has better career prospects than you do, and it doesn't even have to carry a shovel. As the sun continues to drop, the social layers start to peel away. The wealthy travellers are pushing their drivers to reach the next Mancio, the high-end imperial hotels, before dark. They don't want to be on the road at night. The Appian Way is safe, but safe is a relative term when you're carrying a chest of gold coins and the only light is the moon. You, however, are the night's protection. As the column moves, you see the civilian traffic thinning out. The road is becoming yours again. The little people and the big people have all scurried off to their respective beds, leaving the stone to the boots and the iron. It's a strange feeling being part of the machine that makes all this social climbing possible. Without you and your 5,000 brothers in arms, that senator wouldn't be napping in his litter. He'd be hiding in his villa with the gates locked. You are the wall that moves. You are the reason the Queen of Roads functions as a highway rather than a battlefield. You look at the basalt blocks, now stained a deep bruised purple by the twilight, and feel a sense of grim satisfaction. Let the nobles have their cushions and their silk curtains. You have the road, you have the rhythm, and most importantly, you have the knowledge that tomorrow morning you'll still be standing, while they'll still be complaining about the quality of their grapes. The The column begins to slow as the scouts signal the location of the knight's camp. The hierarchy of the road is about to be replaced by the hierarchy of the fort. In a few minutes you'll be digging a ditch next to a man you've known for 5 years, and it won't matter who was in a litter or who was in a carriage. The only thing that will matter is the depth of the trench and the strength of the wall. You take one last look at a distant carriage disappearing over a hill, adjust your pack and prepare to turn this stretch of the Queen of Roads into a fortress. The deep violet of twilight is beginning to settle over the landscape, and as the civilian traffic vanishes into the safety of walled towns, you find yourself sharing the Queen of Roads with a more eclectic cast of characters. The march has slowed to a weary, rhythmic shuffle, and the gaps between the units of your legion allow for a bit more visibility of the travellers who occupy the fringes of Roman society. You aren't just passing stone and grass anymore, you're passing a cross-section of the entire Mediterranean world. The Appian Way is a magnet for anyone with a dream, a debt, or a product to sell. And tonight, it seems they're all out in force, trying to make those last few miles before the moon takes over the sky. A mainstream historical fact that often surprises people is that the Roman roads were incredibly cosmopolitan. You aren't just seeing Italians here. You pass a group of Syrian merchants leading a line of camels. Yes, camels in the heart of Italy, laden with silks and spices that smell like a world you can only imagine. Then there are the itinerant Greek philosophers, easily identifiable by their long, unkempt beards and the way they look at your armour with a mixture of pity and intellectual superiority. They're likely headed to Rome to tutor the children of the elite, or to stand in the forum and argue about the nature of the good life. You, currently covered in dust and smelling like a sour sponge, have a very simple definition of the good life. It's any life where you don't have to walk anymore. Among the crowd you spot a Gallus, a priest of the goddess Cybele, dressed in flamboyant, bright yellow robes and carrying a bronze sistrum that jingles with every step. There's a quirky or fringe tidbit about these travellers. Some of them were basically ancient road performers who lived entirely on the charity of passers-by, using their exotic appearance and loud music to bless travellers in exchange for a few copper coins. You catch the priest's eye, and he offers a cryptic wave. Lucius whispers that he heard these priests carry sacred charms made of dried herbs that can cure foot rot. That's joke number 1. You're pretty sure the only thing that could cure your foot rot at this point is a total limb replacement, but you're not about to pay a guy in a yellow dress to tell you otherwise. The Queen of Roads also plays host to the more desperate side of the empire. You pass a group of shackled slaves being driven south by a mangone, or slave dealer. It's a sobering sight that cuts through your exhaustion. Even as a tired soldier, you have your citizenship and your pay. They have nothing but the road beneath their feet. Historians still argue whether the presence of such large numbers of slaves travelling the roads created a constant undercurrent of tension, or if the Roman public had become so desensitized to the institution that it was simply viewed as heavy cargo. As a legionary, you are the one who would have to put down a revolt if things went sideways, so you keep your hand near the hilt of your gladius as you pass, a habit of aggressive awareness that never quite turns off. The diversity of the travellers is matched by the diversity of their languages. As you march, you hear a cacophony of Greek, Oscan, Aramaic, and various barbarian dialects from the northern frontiers. It's a reminder that Rome isn't just a city, it's an idea that has swallowed the world. You see a veteran from the auxiliary cohorts, a Thracian judging by his tattoos, who has finished his 25 years of service and is now walking home with his bronze diploma and a small pouch of savings. He gives your unit a knowing, weary grin. He's been where you are. He knows the weight of the shield and the lie of the easy relocation. He looks free, and for a second, you're incredibly jealous of a man whose only gear is a simple travel bag. Speaking of gear, you notice a group of circus people on the shoulder of the road, repairing a colourful wagon. They have a bear in a cage, a mangy bored-looking thing that is currently sniffing the air towards Senator, your mule. Senator, true to his name, decides to take a stand and refuses to move. creating a localized traffic jam. The bear doesn't seem impressed. That's joke number 2. The bear has seen more of the Empire than you have, and it didn't even have to carry a shovel to do it. You eventually have to use the butt of your pilum to nudge Senator along, much to the amusement of a passing group of local laundry maids who are carrying baskets of wet linen back to a nearby villa. The social interactions on the road are governed by an unwritten code of mind your own business. You don't ask the merchant where he got his purple dye, and he doesn't ask you why your legion is moving south. The road is a neutral zone, a ribbon of basalt where the only thing that matters is the pace. However, you do see a frumentarius, a member of the Secret Service, weaving through the crowd on a fast horse. He's dressed like a civilian, but everyone knows who he is by the way people suddenly stop talking when he rides past. It's a reminder that the Queen of Roads has eyes and ears everywhere. As the light fades further, you pass a small roadside shrine to Laris Vieles, the gods of the road. It's a humble stone altar covered in small offerings, a few withered flowers, a crust of bread, a lead figurine. You see a messenger stop for a split second to touch the altar for luck before continuing his sprint. It's a quirky Roman habit, treating the road not just as a path, but as a sacred space that needs to be appeased. You don't have time to stop, but you offer a silent prayer to whatever god is in charge of preventing ankles from snapping in the dark. That's joke number 3. You're pretty sure that God is currently on vacation, given how many times you've stumbled in the last hour. The Queen of Roads is getting quieter now. The merchants are looking for places to pull over, and the philosophers have likely found a tavern where they can argue over someone else's wine. The diverse crowd is thinning out, leaving the basalt to you and the rhythmic thunder of the Legion. You feel a strange sense of kinship with all those people you passed. For a few hours you were all part of the same moving tapestry. You are the threads of the Empire woven together by this 15-foot wide strip of stone. You look ahead and see the first flickering torches of the night's destination. The encounters with the others are over for today. Now it's back to the familiar, the predictable, and the exhausting. You adjust your pack one last time, feeling the salt from your sweat crusting on your skin, and prepare to rejoin the world of the camp. The Syrian camels and the Greek philosophers are already memories. The only reality now is the depth of the ditch you're about to dig. But for a moment, the road felt bigger than just a march. It felt like the whole world was walking right alongside you. The landscape is changing again, growing more rugged and insistent as you approach the city of Capua. For days, the Appian Way has been a relatively straight shot through the coastal plains of Latium and Campania. But now the horizon is beginning to fold into the foothills of the Apennines. Capua marks a psychological milestone. It was the original endpoint of the road before it was extended further south. And it feels like leaving the front porch of Rome and stepping into the wilder, deeper parts of the interior. The basalt beneath your caligae is still firm, but the air is losing its salty Mediterranean tang and taking on the crisper, sharper scent of mountain pines and high-altitude dust. Capua itself is a sprawling, wealthy giant, a city so luxurious and decadent that even the Romans have a mainstream historical fact about it. During the Second Punic War, Hannibal's Carthaginian army spent a winter here, and supposedly became so softened by the city's wine, baths, and pleasures that they lost their fighting edge. You look at the massive amphitheatre looming in the distance, one of the largest in the world, and then you look at your own dusty, calloused hands. You can see how a guy could get used to this place, but you aren't here for the games or the gladiators. You're just passing through on the way to the mountains. The Queen of Roads doesn't care about luxury, it only cares about destination. As you bypass the main city's centre, you notice the road begins to tilt. It's a subtle incline at first, but your calves feel it immediately. The engineering here is slightly different. Because the terrain is no longer flat, the road has to navigate the natural saddle of the land. Historians still argue whether the extension of the road from Capua to Beneventum was primarily a military necessity to control the Samnite tribes or a purely economic project to connect the Tyrrhenian and Adriatic seas. To you, it feels like a personal conspiracy to make your pack weigh 10 pounds more than it did this morning. The Iter Iustum, that regular march, starts to feel a lot more like a slow-motion mountain climb. There's a quirky tidbit you've noticed about the milestones in this region. Many of them aren't just simple distance markers. They've been updated by different emperors over the centuries. You pass one that has 3 different names carved into it, each one trying to take credit for repairing a section that was probably fine to begin with. It's like ancient political graffiti, only it's carved in 5-inch deep marble. You imagine the stonemasons coming out here every few decades to chisel off one guy's name and replace it with another's. That's joke number 1. Even in the afterlife, Roman emperors are still arguing over who has the best parking spot on the highway. The environment is becoming more claustrophobic. The wide open vistas of the Campanian plains are being squeezed by limestone ridges. To your right, you see the Caudine Forks, the site of one of Rome's most humiliating historical defeats, where an entire army was forced to pass under the yoke by the Samnites. The memory of that shame still hangs in the air, a reminder that even the Queen of Roads passes through places where Rome wasn't always the master. You find yourself tightening the straps on your shield. You're in friendly territory, but the geography itself feels a bit more teethy than it did yesterday. The heat is different here too. Instead of the damp, heavy heat of the marshes, it's a dry, baking warmth that reflects off the white limestone cliffs. Your water skin is getting light, and you find yourself dreaming of the frigidarium back in Capua. One of your tent mates, a guy named Drusus who claims to be an amateur botanist, points out a specific type of mountain herb growing in the cracks of the road. He says if you chew it, it stops your thirst. But the last time Drusus gave you botanical advice, you spent 2 days in the latrine tent. That's joke number 2. Drusus is the only man in the Legion who can turn a medicinal herb into a biological hazard faster than a barbarian with a poisoned arrow. The road itself is a marvel in this terrain. In some places, the engineers have literally cut a shelf into the side of the mountain to keep the path level. You look over the edge of the shoulder and see a drop-off that makes your stomach do a little flip. The basalt blocks are still there, perfectly fitted even on the edge of a precipice. It's a testament to Roman stubbornness. Oh, there's a mountain in the way. We'll just carve a 12-foot wide stone highway into its ribs. You find yourself walking a bit closer to the inside wall, the rough-hewn stone occasionally brushing against your shield. The traffic has thinned out significantly since you left the outskirts of Capua. The wealthy litters and fancy carriages are gone, replaced by sturdy pack mules and local hill country farmers. They look at the Legion with a different expression, less awe and more weary resignation. They know that where the Legion goes, taxes and requisitions usually follow. You pass a small mountain village where a woman is spinning wool on her porch. She doesn't even look up as 5,000 men clank past. You're just another part of the scenery, like a slow-moving river of iron. Your legs are starting to feel the Capua climb. The rhythm of the Caligay has changed from a crisp clack to a heavier, more deliberate thump. You're no longer counting miles, you're counting the number of times you can lift your knees before they give out. Lucius is currently making a sound that is half sigh and half whistle, a sure sign that he's reaching his limit. You nudge him with your elbow. Just wait until we hit the real mountains, Lucius. This is just the driveway. He looks at you with a gaze that could wither a laurel wreath. That's joke number 3. If looks could kill, you'd be buried in Capua, and he'd be the new emperor, primarily because he'd be the only person left with enough energy to stand up. As the sun begins to dip behind the ridges, the temperature drops rapidly. The Queen of Roads is draped in long blue shadows that make the white limestone glow. You can see the smoke from a distant watchtower, a signal fire being lit for the night. You're entering the interior now, the rugged heart of the peninsula. The road ahead is steeper, narrower, and far from the comforts of the coast. But as you look back at the lights of Capua twinkling in the valley behind you, you feel a sense of accomplishment. You've crossed the threshold. You aren't just moving south anymore. You're moving through the very bones of Italy, following the stone path that Rome has carved into the world's soul. The Queen of Roads has finally lost its gentle coastal manners. As you push deeper into the Samnium territory toward Beneventum, the Appian Way begins to coil like a snake as it fights for every inch of elevation. This is the grueling Apennine ascent, where the engineering brilliance of the road meets the raw, unyielding physics of the mountain. The basalt blocks, which felt so flat and friendly near Rome, now seem to be tilted at an angle designed specifically to make your shins scream in Latin. You aren't just marching anymore, you are leaning into the earth, your centre of gravity shifting forward until you're staring almost exclusively at the heels of the man in front of you and the cracks in the stone. A mainstream historical fact that you feel in your very marrow is that the Apennines are the backbone of Italy, a rugged limestone range that historically divided the peninsula into east and west. Crossing them wasn't just a matter of walking, it was a strategic feat. For the Legion, this is where the logistics get interesting. The baggage train, with its heavy wagons and grumpy mules, starts to slow down, creating a telescoping effect in the column. 1 minute you're at a brisk pace, and the next you're standing still on a 15-degree incline because a mule named General decided he's done with the uphill lifestyle. That's joke number 1. That mule has more veto power over the Roman Empire's movement than the entire Senate combined. The air is thinner here, and much colder. The humidity of the Pontine marshes is a distant, sticky memory, replaced by a wind that whistles through the gaps in your lorica hamata and carries the sharp scent of wet rock and juniper. Your breathing is shallow and rhythmic, syncing up with the heavy thud-thud of your heart. You notice that the curvatura, the road's arch, is even more pronounced here to prevent the mountain runoff from turning the road into a waterfall. Historians still argue whether the Roman engineers used a specific type of toothed paving in the steepest mountain sections to provide better traction for draft animals, or if they simply relied on the brute strength of slaves and soldiers to push the carts up the slopes. Looking at the gouges in the stone, you're leaning toward the brute strength theory. The silence of the mountains is profound, broken only by the mechanical symphony of the Legion. There is the clink of the rings in your mail, the creak of leather straps, and the occasional clatter of a shield hitting a helmet as someone loses their footing. You've developed a mountain stare, a glazed look that focuses on a point exactly 3 feet in front of your toes. If you look up at the peaks, you'll get discouraged. If you look down at the valleys, you'll get dizzy. So you just look at the basalt. It's grey, it's hard, and it's the only thing keeping you from sliding back to Capua. There's a quirky tidbit you heard from an old veteran about these mountain passes. They say the echoes here are haunted by the voices of the Samnite warriors who fought Rome for centuries. Sometimes, when the wind hits the limestone crags just right, it sounds like a war cry. Lucius, of course, is convinced that every rustle in the brush is a mountain lion or a ghost. He's currently clutching his pilum so tight his knuckles are white. That's joke number 2. Lucius is the only man in the army who's afraid of a mountain lion, but perfectly willing to fight a 300-pound Gaul for a loaf of bread. You tell him the only thing haunted in these mountains is his own hygiene, which earns you a grunt that sounds suspiciously like a mountain lion in its own right. The road narrows in places where the cliffs press in close. You pass a crepido, a raised stone sidewalk that's barely wide enough for a single person to walk on, designed for pedestrian to stay clear of the heavy military traffic. You see a lone shepherd sitting on the crepido, watching the Legion pass with a look of utter indifference. He has a small fire going and is roasting something that smells divine. It's a reminder that while you're a cog in a world-spanning machine, he's just a man with some sheep and a very nice view. You find yourself wondering if he's ever been to Rome, or if this 15-foot wide strip of stone is just a weird, flat river that occasionally spits out thousands of men in red tunics. The physical exhaustion is reaching a new peak. Your Marius's mule pack feels like it's filled with lead bars instead of grain and leather. Every step requires a conscious effort of the will. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen callback. At this altitude, you don't need sunscreen. You need a wool blanket and a hug. The sun is bright, but it has no warmth. It's a cold, clinical light that reveals every scratch on your shield and every fraying thread on your tunic. You've entered the trance of the trail where time loses its meaning. Are you in the 12th mile or the 20th? It doesn't matter. The road goes up, so you go up. A fringe scholarly debate you once overheard involved whether the Romans used fire to crack the rocks when carving these mountain paths. They would build massive bonfires against the limestone and then douse it with cold vinegar to make the stone shatter. It sounds like a lot of work just to make a path, but then again, a lot of work is basically the Roman national anthem. You look at a sheer rock face that has been cut perfectly vertical to make room for the road and realise that Rome doesn't adapt to nature. It forces nature to submit to a blueprint. It's terrifying and impressive all at once. As the column crests a final brutal ridge, the view opens up. Below you, tucked into a valley, lies Beneventum. The road stretches down toward it in a series of elegant stone-clad loops. You've made it over the hump. The descent will be hard on the knees, but the lungs will finally get a break. You feel a small surge of adrenaline, that second wind that only comes when you can see the finish line, or at least the place where you'll get to dig your next ditch. That's joke number 3. The only thing waiting for you at the bottom of this beautiful, majestic mountain is more manual labour and a bowl of grey porridge. You adjust your helmet, feeling the cold wind bite at your ears, and begin the downward trek. The basalt beneath your caligae is slick with a fine dusting of mountain grit, making the descent a delicate dance of balance. But the Queen of Roads is still there, solid and unmoving, guiding you through the heart of the Apennines. You've conquered the ascent. You've stared down the limestone and the altitude and the stubbornness of mules. As you head toward the valley, the rhythmic clack-crunch of the boots takes on a slightly faster, more optimistic tempo. The Adriatic is still miles away, but you've proven that no mountain is tall enough to stop a Roman with a shovel and a schedule. The descent from the rugged heights of the Apennines has brought a new kind of energy to the road. You are no longer fighting gravity. You are now witnessing the sheer speed of the Roman Empire. As you march toward the interior plateau, you hear a rhythmic, rapid-fire drumming of hooves behind you. Fast, relentless, and distinct from the heavy plodding of the baggage mules. The column instinctively leans toward the shoulder to make way for a rider of the cursus publicus, the imperial post. This is a mainstream historical fact that often goes unappreciated. The Appian Way isn't just a path for boots, it's a high-speed data cable made of stone. This messenger, likely changing horses every 10 miles of mutatio, can cover up to 50 miles a day, carrying orders from the Emperor that will change lives hundreds of miles away. The rider flashes past in a blur of dust and sweat, his leather dispatch bag bouncing against his flank. He doesn't look at you, he doesn't look at anyone. He is a man possessed by the clock. You realise that while you are the slow, crushing weight of Rome, he is its nervous system. Historians still argue whether the cursus publicus was available to the general public for a steep fee, or if it was strictly reserved for government officials with a specific diploma, a signed warrant from the emperor. Looking at the sheer intensity of that rider, you suspect that if a civilian tried to flag him down to mail a letter to their aunt, they'd simply be trampled into the basalt. The road here is a masterpiece of efficiency. It levels out into a high plateau where the engineers have laid the stones with a precision that makes the mountain sections look like a rough draft. Because the ground is flatter, the Roman obsession with the straight line has returned with a vengeance. You can see the road stretching toward the horizon, like a silver needle, cutting through the golden grasslands. It's a quirky tidbit you heard once. The Roman postal service was so efficient that a message could travel from Rome to Brundisium in less than a week, a speed that wouldn't be surpassed until the invention of the steam engine. That's joke number 1. The Emperor's mail moves faster than your brain currently does after 14 days of walking. Though to be fair, your brain isn't being swapped out for a fresh one every 10 miles at a relay station. The Queen of Roads feels alive here. You pass a Mancio, one of the state-run inns, where a fresh team of horses is being led out of a stall. The air smells of hay, horse sweat, and the sharp metallic tang of a blacksmith's forge. You watch a wheelwright hammering an iron rim onto a carriage wheel, the rhythmic ping 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 of his hammer syncing up for a moment with the clack-crunch of your boots. It's a symphony of industry. Everything on the Appian Way is designed to keep the machine moving. If a wheel breaks, there is a shop. If a horse tires, there is a stable. If a soldier's sandal loses a nail, there is a pile of spares in the baggage train. There's a fringe scholarly debate about the milestones in this particular stretch. Some researchers suggest that these pillars weren't just for distance, but served as information hubs, where travellers could leave messages or symbols carved into the stone for those following behind. You look closely at a milestone as you pass and see a series of small scratched-in marks, likely just the ancient equivalent of Quintus was here. But you like to imagine it's a secret code for the frumentarii or a warning about the quality of the stew at the next tavern. That's joke number 2. If the message says Lucius is coming, the next town probably has enough time to lock their wine cellars and hide their daughters. The speed of the messengers makes your own progress feel even slower. You've been on this road for what feels like a lifetime and you're still not at the sea. The mental game is shifting from surviving the climb to surviving the repetition. To pass the time, you watch the Kissia, the light two-wheeled taxicabs of the Roman world, zip past. They are built for speed, not comfort. And they rattle over the stone seams with a sound like a bag of marbles being shaken by a giant. You see a young official in one of them, his face pale and his hands gripping the side rail for dear life as the driver whips the ponies into a gallop. You'd feel sorry for his spine if you weren't so busy worrying about your own knees. The logistics of the Imperial Post are a reminder of the sheer scale of the world you're upholding. Orders for grain from Egypt, reports on troop movements in Britain, and the latest gossip from the Palatine Hill all flow along this basalt ribbon. You are the guardian of this flow. Without the security provided by the legions, the Queen of Roads would be a series of disconnected tracks, and the messengers would be easy prey for every bandit with a bow. You take a sip of your posca, the vinegar water still sharp on your tongue, and feel a sense of connection to the wider world. You're not just a guy in a red tunic, you're a protector of the global network. Speaking of gossip, Lucius claims he heard from a messenger at the last watering hole that the Emperor's planning a massive triumph in Rome soon. You remind him that messengers are the original fake news sources, and that half of what they say is just to get a free drink. That's joke number 3. A messenger's story is like a Roman tavern's wine, usually 10% truth and 90% water from a suspicious bucket. Still, it gives you something to talk about for the next 5 miles. The sun is beginning to cast long dramatic shadows over the plateau. The road, once a bright grey, is turning a deep, bruised charcoal. You can feel the pace of the column tightening. The Centurion wants to reach the next fortified relay station before the light fails. You adjust the weight of your pilum, the iron head catching the last rays of the sun. The speed of the messengers has left a lingering hum in the air, a sense of urgency that you've absorbed into your own stride. The Queen of Roads is quiet again now, the fast riders having vanished into the distance. It's just you, the basalt, and the heartbeat of the march. You aren't moving at the speed of a horse, but you're moving with the inevitability of the tide. The Adriatic is getting closer with every step. You may not be carrying a dispatch bag, but you're carrying the weight of the Empire. And that's a message that doesn't need to be written down to be understood. The high plateau has finally begun to slope downward, and the air is changing again. It's becoming softer, heavier, and carries a faint salt-crusted promise on the breeze. You're entering the final leg of the journey through the heel of Italy, moving toward the Adriatic coast. The landscape here is a silver-green sea of ancient olive trees, their gnarled trunks looking like the muscles of titans frozen in the earth. The Appian Way, however, has one last engineering surprise for you: the transition from the old road to the Via Appia Traiana. While the original route took a more southern mountainous path through Tarentum, you're on the newer, faster northern extension commissioned by Emperor Trajan to bypass the most difficult terrain. A mainstream historical fact that makes your feet very happy is that Trajan's upgrade was essentially the freeway version of the Appian Way. It was designed for speed and efficiency, built with the spoils of the Dacian Wars. You pass a massive triumphal arch at Beneventum, the Arch of Trajan, which marks the beginning of this new branch. It is covered in intricate carvings of the emperor feeding children and sacrificing to the gods, a piece of stone propaganda that reminds you who is paying for your rations. Historians still argue whether this new route was a response to the increasing commercial importance of the East, or simply a way for Trajan to leave a legacy even more permanent than Appius Claudius's original work. Either way, the stones here feel slightly more level, the curves a bit more gradual. The road is flanked by Masseriae, low dry stone walls that separate the highway from the endless olive groves. These walls are a constant feature of the Apulian landscape, and they provide a strange claustrophobic rhythm to the march. Clack wall. You see local workers, their skins darkened to the colour of chestnuts by the sun, harvesting olives or pruning the trees with curved iron knives. They don't stop their work as the legion passes. They've seen 1,000 such columns. To them, you are just the iron fence that keeps the world from falling apart while they tend to the harvest. There's a quirky tidbit about this section of the road. It's famous for its natta, or gnathia, pottery workshops. Occasionally, the ditch diggers or the construction crews find broken shards of this distinctive black-glazed pottery buried under the roadbed. Some soldiers collect them as souvenirs, believing that a shard from a lucky section of the road can protect you from getting a blister. You've got a small, smooth piece of black ceramic tucked into your belt pouch. You don't really believe in the magic, but after 300 miles, you aren't taking any chances with the gods of footwear. That's joke number 1. You're a professional soldier of Rome, but you're currently being held together by a piece of broken pottery and a lot of hope. The heat is different now. It's the dry, dusty heat of the Apulian summer. The dust kicked up by the thousands of boots in front of you creates a fine red powder that coats everything. Your eyelashes are red, your teeth feel gritty, and your red tunic has turned a dull, earthy brown. You look at Lucius, who is currently trying to wipe the dust off his forehead, only to turn it into a streak of mud with his sweat. He looks like he's trying to camouflage himself as a brick. That's joke number 2. If he stays still for too long, a construction crew might accidentally pave over him and call him a milestone. One of the more interesting features of the Via Traiana is the inclusion of tepi, stone boundary markers that strictly define the public land of the road versus the private land of the estates. The Romans were obsessed with property rights, and the road was a sacred public space. If a farmer moved a stone wall 6 inches onto the road, it was practically an act of war against the state. You see a surveyor, a grammaticus, using his groma, a cross-shaped sighting tool, to check the alignment of a new section of wall. It's a reminder that Rome isn't just held together by swords, but by geometry and law. The boredom of the final miles is the most dangerous enemy. You find yourself hallucinating the sound of the sea. Every time the wind rustles through the olive leaves, you think, that's it. That's the Adriatic. But it never is. It's just more leaves, more dust, and more basalt. To keep your mind sharp, you start a betting pool with the men in your contubernium on exactly which mile of the first smell of salt will hit. You've bet 3 sesterces on milestone 342. Lucius has bet on never. because he's convinced the world ends in a wall of olive trees and we've all been dead since Capua. That's joke number 3. The afterlife is just a never-ending Roman road where the only thing to eat is porridge and the only thing to see is the back of Lucius's dusty neck. As the sun begins its final dive toward the horizon, the sky turns a brilliant, bruised purple, the colour of an emperor's cloak. The white limestone of the Via Traiana seems to soak up the light, glowing like a phosphor path through the dark groves. You can feel the change in the air. It's cooler, more humid, and definitely saltier. You take a deep breath, and there it is. The sharp, unmistakable tang of the sea. You've reached the heel. Brundisium is just over the next series of low hills. The rhythm of the march picks up. The exhaustion is still there, deep and heavy, but it's being pushed aside by the realization that the Queen of Roads is almost done with you. You've walked across a world, you've seen the tombs of the dead, the swamps of the living, the mountains of the gods, and the speed of the messengers. You're a different man than the one who stood at the Porta Capena all those days ago. Your feet are harder, your heart is slower, and your soul is a little bit more made of stone. You adjust your shield, match your breathing to the clack-crunch of the boots, and prepare for the final descent into the harbour. The journey is almost over, but the road is eternal. The final horizon has arrived. As you crest the last rise of the Apulian hills, the Adriatic Sea doesn't just appear, it explodes into view, a vast shimmering expanse of cobalt and turquoise that looks like a fallen piece of the sky. After weeks of staring at the grey basalt of the Appian Way and the dusty green of olive groves, the sheer intensity of the blue is enough to make you blink in disbelief. Down there, nestled between two natural harbour horns that give the city its name from the Mesopic word Brentian, meaning stag's head, lies Brundisium. This is it, the end of the line, the gateway to the east. The Via Appia Traiana makes its final triumphant descent into the city. A mainstream historical fact you feel in every fibre of your being is that Brundisium was the most important port in the Roman world for anyone heading to Greece, Egypt, or the Levant. It was the point zero for the legions. Every great name in your history books, Caesar, Pompey, Octavian, Mark Antony, has stood on these same stones, looking out at that same water, likely feeling the same mix of relief and trepidation that you do now. For you, the road is ending, but for the Empire, the journey is just beginning. As you march through the city gates, the Queen of Roads offers one final spectacular flourish. At the very edge of the harbour, perched on a cliff overlooking the water, stand two massive twin columns of Proconnesian marble. These are the Appian columns, the literal exclamation point at the end of the Roman world. One still stands today, nearly 60 feet tall, capped with a capital featuring the faces of gods like Jupiter, Neptune and Mars. Historians still argue whether these were built by Trajan to celebrate the completion of the road, or if they served as a monumental lighthouse base. To a weary soldier, they are simply the finish line. You look up at the face of Mars, the god of war, and you swear he's giving you a slight stony nod of respect. The atmosphere in Brundisium is electric compared to the silent mountains you just left. The city is a melting pot of languages and smells. You pass warehouses, horrea, stuffed with grain, wine, and oil. The scent of the sea is now mixed with the smell of tar, hemp rope, and exotic spices. You see sailors from Alexandria with gold earrings, merchants from Rhodes in pleated tunics, and fellow soldiers from the Eastern legions looking lean and tanned. The social hierarchy has shifted again. Here, the man of the hour isn't the senator in the litter, but the ship captain who can navigate the crossing to Dyrrachium without hitting a storm. One quirky, bittersweet tidbit about reaching the end of the Appian Way is the ritual of the boots. As the column finally comes to a halt in the barracks near the harbour, there is a collective deafening silence as 5,000 men stop moving at once. Then the sound of buckles being undone. You sit on a stone bench, Peel off your caligae and look at your feet. They're a disaster zone, blistered, stained orange by the dust and calloused beyond recognition. But as you rub the circulation back into your toes, you realise you've done something that very few people in the world can claim. You've walked the Queen of Roads from the heart of the capital to the edge of the sea. That's joke number 1. Your feet are currently the most travelled parts of the Roman Empire, and they were demanding an immediate audience with the local bathhouse. Lucius is currently staring at his own feet with a look of profound betrayal, as if they were the ones who forced him to walk 350 miles. He's already asking if there's a ship back to Rome tomorrow. That's joke number 2. The only way Lucius is getting back to Rome is if he walks, and the look he gives you suggests he'd rather swim to Greece than see another basalt block for the rest of his life. As the sun sets over the Adriatic, you walk out to the harbour wall one last time. You look back at the way you came. The Appian Way is still there, a pale ribbon disappearing into the darkness of the hills. It's more than just a road, it's a monument to the Roman will. It's the proof that no distance is too great, no mountain too high, and no swamp too deep for the mind that knows how to plan and the hand that knows how to build. You came here as a mule of Marius, but you're leaving as a witness to the greatest engineering feat in human history. The Queen of Roads has delivered you. You are 350 miles from home, standing on the edge of a new world, ready for whatever comes next. You take a deep breath of the salt air, turn your back on the water, and head toward the campfire of your contubernium. You've earned your rest. Tomorrow the sea awaits, but tonight the stone is silent.